G'day guys, this is Nick at Stridewise.com and I am so excited to do a new review of Sagara Bootmaker, one of the preeminent Indonesian brands. There's so much to talk about with this brand, and it's a really good example of why I'm refilming some of my earlier videos, because I reviewed a pretty nondescript Sagara boot 5 years ago and I didn't do it as well as I should have. Like, there are a lot of elements with these boots that I should have really emphasized more. So let's do a good review of Sagara Bootmaker. Another reason I'm excited for this video is I got these boots in Indonesia. I was visiting friends in Jakarta with my dad, and I told him if we're going to be in Indonesia, we have to go to Bandung and meet the boot guys. And I filmed an interview with Bagus, the founder of Sagara. It's still getting edited. We have to do translations and all this kind of stuff. Eventually, it'll get to you. And here's what I'll talk about: Indonesia. As an Australian, albeit one living in New York City, I've always been fascinated by Indonesia. They're like Australia's closest neighbor. They have 10 times our population. They're all Muslims. There's a really interesting relationship between our two nations. I actually had a job lined up at a newspaper in Jakarta before I came to New York instead. Like, I was planning to live there. It's a really interesting place. I have a video guide to Indonesian brands up here and in the description below, but long story short, the Dutch colonized Indonesia, and the going theory is that this, combined with the Chinese interest in the 20th century, is why the creative hub of Bandung still has such a thriving industry of old style European footwear. And I do mean old style, like pre-1869, which is when the Goodyear welt was invented. I really want to frame this review properly, so for those who don't know, the Goodyear welt's invention enabled us to make welted, like resolable boots much more quickly with machines, the Goodyear welt machine, replacing the need to do the welts by hand. But there are purists out there, and Indonesia's market is the American boot purist, basically. It's more than half of Sagara's business, who prefer hand welting. It's more laborious, it requires more skill, so that in and of itself is worth paying for if you like wearing embodiments of really hard work and high skill. And that is a big appeal of this stuff, and I think it's valid. It's almost like a watch in that regard, like why some people prefer the automatic watches relative to like the quartz watches. Like it's more complex, it's harder to make, and therefore it's more attractive to a lot of people, even if there's not a functional benefit of an automatic watch over using your phone to tell the time. You know what I mean? I mean, I like watches, but you see what I mean. The founder of Sagara, Bagus, he said this when I asked him why so many people go to Indonesia for their boots.
Maybe because we do all the process by hand. As you can see, we didn't have like the big stinking machinery. No, we didn't have that.
And the word handmade is an interesting one, because basically every boot brand out there says that they're handmade, right? And to be fair, I don't think you can make a boot 100% without using hand, so you can get that loophole of saying it's handmade. But there are a lot of brands that say handmade and still use a pretty remarkable amount of machinery. Like, for example, Carmina, they make really expensive, really nice boots in Spain. And look at these machines they use to last and shape their Chelsea boots. Like, this is a big part of why the leather curves in just the right ways. They're very, very good boots. But if you really want handmade, you really want that labor and artisanal sort of bent to it, Sagara doesn't have any of those machines. They don't even have Goodyear welted machines, and the same is true of all the Indonesian brands I visited down there. I went to 3 of them. So this one boot takes them 3 weeks to make from start to finish, and the company is only able to produce 10 to 15 boots per week with a staff of 5.
When we do the hand lasted, we didn't have like heaters or oven. We didn't force the leathers to mold into the shape of the shoe last.
Yeah.
So we let them cure naturally. Usually we keep them in the shape like almost 2 weeks, so they can mold perfectly.
This is actually something I saw at Tricker's factory in Britain. They actually have a room that's like a sauna that heats the leather to make it easier to last, like to pull over the foot-shaped mold. They don't have that in Bandung, and not at any of the places I visited, and there are other ways of heating leather as well. So there are practically countless ways that Sagara boots are very, very old-fashioned. Does it make it a better boot? Well, when it comes to lasting, like pulling the leather over the mold of the foot, Bagus says, quote, "The machines cannot control the tension the way you can when making them by hand, where you can feel how much the leather wants to be stretched. Many find that to make a more comfortable boot." Well, the average person knows that? Probably not. But again, there are high-end guys who they like that extra level of skill involved. These sorts of guys, the boot guys, they also argue that hand welting relative to Goodyear welting, like doing it all by hand, which takes a long time. And these boot guys, they'll also argue that hand-welted boots like these, like it uses just one thread looping inside and out, which makes it more durable and less likely to break at certain areas. That's also an argument that Bagus put to me. Hand-welted boots like these, they also have thicker insoles as a rule, because the maker needs to cut part of the leather at the bottom to create the channel, necessitating thicker leather. So Sagara's insoles are 4.5 millimeters thick, very thick, and they use insoles that are 4 or 5 millimeters thick too. And indeed, these Cordmaster boots have 2 midsoles. and an insole. So you have more support, more material, more leather to mold and conform to your feet. And indeed, in a month of wearing these, I have sunk into the leather and it's now supporting my arch really nicely. Like I can feel those benefits of all that extra leather. So a hand-welted boot, yeah, it has more leather, has less empty space supporting your feet, and this matters to some people. I mean, a lot of people actually, because Sagara's business is thriving. So let's talk about, or continue to talk about, Sagara's flagship boot, the Cordmaster. The one I reviewed before in my old video was the basic service boot, the Legacy 9. That was when I thought it was best to review the most accessible, versatile boot from a company. But this lace-to-toe, flaming gold Cordmaster is the Sagara boot. They're also well known for their boondockers and their hiking boot, the trailmaster, but the Cordmaster is the top seller, especially in this style. It embodies so much of what people tend to get from Indonesian makers, or what the Indonesian boot buyer gravitates towards, which is overbuilt boots. It's lace to toe, like it's a monkey boot. It's inspired by military boots from either Poland or Czechoslovakia. It's a little unclear as to who invented them around World War II. The benefit of monkey boots being that you can adjust the fit all the way up and down the boot. It's like the opposite of a Chelsea, basically, or another slip-on boot. It's more adjustable. And I also need to mention this side patch here. It gives some extra protection. It's largely decorative for the average customer, but Burgos said that it was inspired by lineman boots who climbed poles to fix electricity lines and stuff because they're braiding the inside of their boots here. It's got a double leather midsole as well, this boot, so it feels incredibly steady underfoot. It's incredibly inflexible as well, relative to a single midsole, which is sufficient for just about everyone, one midsole. But as I said, a lot of people like that overbuilt element of these boots. Plus, some guys find that if they work in challenging conditions or if they're big and tall, a double midsole can provide more support. And the boots are heavy. For reference, one Thursday Captain boot, 775 grams. My Iron Rangers from Red Wing, 885 grams. My Nix Americana boots, Nix boots in the Pacific Northwest, famous for making really, really heavy boots. Those are 1,175 grams. And the Cordmasters, although they look smaller than a Nix boot, they weigh about the same. They're like 1,150 grams for one of these. There are a couple of other reasons for the weight. One is the incredibly thick leather. This is sort of the go-to leather for all Indonesian boots these days, but especially the Cordmaster. If you see how many pictures there are of them on Sagara's Instagram, this exact boot, this leather. This leather is over 3 millimeters thick, at least 50% thicker than Red Wings, and it's natural, so it's undyed, vegetable tanned, Horsebutt leather from Italy's Maryam tannery. It is very stiff because of the thickness, also the fact that it's vegetable tanned, also the fact that it's Horsebutt. I've worn these for over a month and it still rubs my shin the wrong way sometimes, but it is gorgeous. You get this really cool honeycombing effect as well on the hide, and because it is natural undyed leather, it does get a patina very, very quickly.
And it ages very, very fast. Seriously, you will find this patina to medium brown in just like half years.
And then there's a construction to talk about. So the layers are veg tan insole, cork filling, leather filling, double rib steel shank, double midsoles, and rubber outsoles. The outsoles are the world famous Dr. Sole. Very hard to get, very boot guy's sole. Like boot guys always love Dr. Sole over everyone else, even day night. The way that the upper is attached to the sole as well, this is a big one, you're incredibly unlikely to find a Norwegian welt anywhere outside of Indonesia, not these days. So hand welting is already super labor intensive. Like Norwegian welting makes it even more intensive. So it takes them 2 hours for them to make it, and these are very highly skilled guys as well. This sort of construction demands more precision, additional preparation time, and tighter stitching on the inseam compared to a regular flat welt or even regular hand welt. It's a lot to break down for this video, but basically the upper is stitched down under the welt, and the stitching on the welt is a 3-row braid, making for a very distinctive look that connects the welt to the upper. There is some debate as to whether Norwegian welt or Norwegian welt or Norwegian construction is different. Burgos says Norwegian doesn't have a welt, but I'm trying to keep this video from going too far into the weeds, trying and failing. But the point of Norwegian welts is that it is meant to be about as waterproof as you can make a boot, or it was the most waterproof way you can make a boot before we invented like Gore-Tex materials and stuff like that. So it's like if you're colonizing Africa or something in the 19th century, you'd be wearing like Norwegian welted boots. In any case, it's still very, very laborious. It looks cool as well, the Norwegian welt, and a lot of people, just because it's so rare and because it's so laborious, like the rest of the boot, like getting the extra thick horse leather, the extra midsoles, like a lot of the stuff involved here, it's harder to make and rarer. So, the price, is it a pro or a con? These boots are about 600 bucks, depending on the exchange rate, the leather you use, and so on. To put that into perspective, there are a lot of American-made brands, like Oak Street, for instance, that will sell you Goodyear welted boots, they're not hand welted, with less expensive leather, like from Horween instead of Maryam, like a fairly normal boot, like, single midsole, all the rest of it, and they'll charge you over $600 for that. Largely because they're made in America, because labor is like the vast majority of a boot's price. The same goes for Nick's boots in the Pacific Northwest. My Americana boots are $650 at a minimum, and you can add to that if you change like, different material for the eyelets and so on. It's really easy for them to get to over $700, especially if you're using like a Wicked and Craig leather, that kind of stuff. So the average guy will think that $600 for a boot is expensive, of course. These other brands I mentioned, Oak Street and Nick's and even Viberg in some respects, they are more expensive with less complex construction, less labor involved, less skill required to make them, and less expensive materials and construction. I don't think anyone in the US is making boots like this anyway, and if they were, it'd probably be over $1,000. So it is a good buy if this is what you want. If you just want like a Chrome XL service boot from Sagara, it will be cheaper than this overbuilt monkey boot. But remember, another thing to note is that Sagara doesn't have the option of giving you Goodyear welted instead of hand welted, for example. And they can't machine last either. So it's not gonna be like a one-to-one substitute. If you got like a Red Wing boot, like a Blacksmith or something, which is much more simple construction, it's a machine lasted, it's Goodyear welted on a machine and everything else. If you ask them just to make that for you, there are still going to be elements there that make it a more skillfully made boot than like a Red Wing. The point being, if you don't care about hand welting, hand lasting, that kind of stuff, you just want, I like this American boot here, can you make it for me for cheaper? It will be cheaper, but you will still be needing to pay for the labor required in hand welting and hand lasting and that kind of stuff, because they just don't have the machinery to make it exactly like they do in the US, which is how to make it at scale and cheaper, relatively speaking. Concrete pros and cons. Concrete pros. If you want this boot, if you want a boot like this, if you like all this artistry stuff and all the handmade-ness of it, it is cheaper than it would be elsewhere. It is really world-class materials, like stuff that is highly sought after, kind of hard to find, and very few brands work with it because it's expensive and the average person doesn't care to pay that much for it. So I'm talking about, yeah, the Horsebutt that's natural and vegetable tan, and it's from Maryam in Italy. The Dr. Sol soles, which are very expensive. Most guys wouldn't bother paying extra for something if it had Dr. Sol, but it's a boot guy's boot. Frankly, so few people care about that mass market boot makers won't bother making stuff with them. If this is what you want, it's a good price. Sagara is also totally customizable. Like if 2 leather midsoles seems like overkill to you, and it is for practically everybody, it's not necessary, and it makes it really inflexible and adds to the weight and everything else. But if you don't want that, you can get a single midsole. Like if you don't like this lineman patch here, you can lose it. Like, would you like this boot like this, but not lace to toe because you don't like monkey boots? You can do that. And of course, the big pro here, what people really gravitate toward, is that this is more of a piece of artistry, like craftsmanship, than just about any other boots, even ones that say that they're handmade. It's very hard to find this kind of craftsmanship, this level of craftsmanship, the hand welting and no heat hand lasting and so on. And the boots are all individuals too. So getting a boot made individually for you, that scratches a very certain kind of itch that a lot of guys have. These are John's boots. I'm wearing Michael's boots. These are my boots made for me to my specifications, and that's really pleasing to a lot of guys. I mean, there are tiny operations here, like Roll Club and Creosote that might be able to reach this level or approach this level, but those wait lists are often years long and they cost 4 figures. So again, if that's the kind of stuff you like, Indonesia is a good place to get it. The cons. Surprisingly, they don't go wider than I think double E, they told me, which is surprising. They can make you custom stuff. That's gonna be more expensive. They might be able to make you a custom last, but it's really easy to mess up sending them the measurements and so on. So if you have really wide feet, they might be able to accommodate you, but it'll be more expensive than you would think. If you don't care about hand welting versus Goodyear welting at all, like if you just want some boots that are durable and water resistant, you can just get some from somewhere else. These are boots that are very rare in the way they're made, and they're priced accordingly. Priced well, but still more than like a pair of Red Wings. And you have to join a wait list to get them as well, which is on average like 4 to 5 months long, sometimes longer if you want boots made of shell cordovan or shark skin or something special, which they will make for you. So if you find it interesting, but not 5-month wait interesting, that's a con. That's a con for you. One thing I've learned since starting this channel and doing that old Sagara video is there are guys who wear boots and there are boot guys. You might have noticed that just about everything premium I've said in this video needs explaining to guys who aren't boot guys, like vegetable tan leather, hand welting, Norwegian welts, Dr. Sole, double midsoles, all this kind of stuff. Boot guys love this. Guys just looking for a pair of boots because they have 2 feet and sometimes encounter rain, not very likely to be as drawn into this. They don't like they probably won't want to have a glossary to understand every element of their boots. They won't want to make 5 months since he made, and they won't want to pay more than you pay for a Thursday boot, which is why I recommend Thursdays so much, because the average guy is not a boot guy. The average guy does not make 6 figures, and the average guy just wants some shoes. You know, they don't care about all this kind of stuff. they don't want to pay too much money, you know what I mean? There are reasons to like this boot the way it is. That doesn't mean you have to, you know? That said, it's hard to criticize too much in this con section because you can change so much. So the tongue slides to the left, even though it's mostly gusseted. I don't even know if that's fixable, to be honest. I've always wondered about that. But sometimes that's just kind of the way cookie crumbles. Those are 2 things that might bug you. But otherwise, those are the main cons of these boots, besides the wait time. And also, I guess the price in some respects, like they are well priced what you get, but you can't get them made as cheaply as possible. Like they kind of have to be handmade to a degree. So like Thursday boots are still cheaper than the cheapest Indonesian boot. You can't really find Indonesian boots under 200 bucks these days. You used to 5 years ago, not really anymore. And of course, the other con with this brand and any made to order brand overseas is hard to do returns and exchanges, which shouldn't be forgotten because I get DMs from guys all the time who are just sitting and stressing for 5 months straight waiting for boots that they're not sure will actually fit them. But just take your foot measurements and pray. That's it for my Sagara review, man. If you like wearing something super rare and made just for you with leather and construction you won't find in the US, pretty much, definitely not. They're cool. Cool stuff. Sagara boots. Do you have any Sagara boots? Do you have any Indonesian boots? What do you reckon? What cons am I missing? When they're so customizable, it's hard to think of that many cons, but I got a couple in there. Very cool boots, super rare, and I confess there's an extra little kind of thrill of wearing something that practically no one can get their hands on. There's an element that I like about it, and I think it's okay to like that and pay for what that costs, if you want. That's it. Bye, everybody. Subscribe to this channel, and then you'll find my interview with Sagara and a couple other bootmakers down in Indonesia as well. For my Indonesia trip, bye. See you later. Goodbye.